Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, episode 56, Helix. And here they are. Helix, how are you doing? Hello.
Hey, hi. I'm not too bad. It's a bit warm. That's my main concern right now. No, I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing great. Thanks so much for being here. We were talking right before that I don't think I've ever met you in person, but we're familiar with each other because, well, speedrunning isn't that big of a community, so we all end up at a lot of similar things. I'm excited to chat with you for a bunch of different reasons, but for folks who may not be familiar with you, tell us a little bit about you. What games do you speedrun? How are you involved in the speedrunning community?
I speedrun Super Monkey Ball. That's probably what most people will know me for. Marble rollers in general. I've been playing a little bit of Rolled Out, the new marble roller that's come out recently. I've run Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure for GDQ as well. Somehow I got that game in. Done some other stuff here and there. Project M, if any of you are familiar with that. I actually used to be a big Smash player. Various games here and there, but mostly Monkey Ball.
We're going to get to it in a little bit, but one of the things that really caught my eye was your AGDQ 2020 Super Monkey Ball run, and it's playing in the little video that if you're seeing it on the stream or on the video, it's there now, and we'll get to it because it's really one of the most favorite runs I've seen. May have had something to do with the fact that I was there live to watch it. That always, I think, adds that little. It's tough to sometimes discern between if it's on, that kind of thing. But that may have helped out a lot. But before we get to that, why don't we start a little bit? Take us a little bit through your history. How did you grow up with gaming? What were some of the games you played, and how did you get your start in gaming?
This is when I was very little. I'm like toddler age, maybe just past toddler age. My dad sat me down in front of a TV with a GameCube and was like, "Here." I'm like, "Okay, sure."
Wow.
And the earliest game I remember playing is actually Super Monkey Ball, so that works out perfectly.
As a toddler, how the hell would you even play that thing?
No, I know, right?
That's wild.
I think it was one of those games where my dad picked up and was like, "Oh, this looks like a good game for kids."
Got
Oops. No, not really.
No, I can't play it as an adult. I never done.
Yeah, very difficult. I don't think it was. I don't know if it was actually the first game I played, but it's the first one I remember playing. So that's kind of what I grew up with. A lot of GameCube stuff, Wii stuff, DS as well. I got into speedrunning in, oh boy, what year is this? I don't even remember. I want to say like 2015 or 2016 when I was at a friend's place for like competitive Smash Bros. Practice and stuff like that. And he showed me speedrunning. Like GDQ, we definitely, it's always GDQ.
I know, right? It's always back to that.
Easily the most popular, still the most popular, but easily all over the place at the time, especially on YouTube. Showed me this YouTube video of whatever speedrun, and I went home and I was like, okay, well, I want to look up speedruns of my favorite games. I looked up Super Monkey Ball. I was like, I want to do that one day. Fast forward to 2017, I was at a convention, 2DCon in Minneapolis, 2017. I was helping with I don't know if I was helping with it or if I was just participating in the Smash tournament that was there. And my friend says, "Hey, there's this speedrunning thing going on." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, why not? I'll go check it out." And that was MidwestSpeedfest, which is the organization I've now been involved with since then, helping put on marathons in Minneapolis primarily, and on online marathons too. So I was on commentary it was Count Gooby's Donkey Kong Country 2 run. Barely knowing anything about the game, just sort of hang out and assist where I can. And Gooby and I ended up being brought on as staff members. And so I've been working with them since 2017. And then we had a marathon in the fall, partially because of me and Gooby were like, "Hey, let's do some more stuff, not just at 2DCon." So we ran a small marathon in the back room of Level Up Games, which is a store that's not even there anymore. The company's still alive, thankfully, but the location that we were at is no longer there. Small marathon in the back room of Level Up Games. I think I had like 5 runs. We had a couple people with like 4 or 5 speedruns on the schedule because we had 2-3 days to fill. So we're like, yeah, why not? We did online too. And that was when I really was pushed into it, almost trial by fire, so to speak.
There's always something, right, that is the kick in the pants that says, "Hey, you should do this a little bit more seriously."
It was a great experience. I think I ran some Monkey Ball stuff. I wasn't great at Monkey Ball at that point, but I ran some Monkey Ball stuff. I ran like Rivals of Aether practice mode. I don't know if that one was planned to run or not, but It was a good time.
Okay, this is
and the start of basically my whole journey.
that is so cool. I am curious. You mentioned that Super Monkey Ball might have been one of the first games that you actually played. If you can remember back to some of your early playthroughs, was it the type of game that you'd want to play through all the levels? Were you the type of person that already started trying to? I'm always curious. Like, what was like your approach then? And obviously, as a speedrunner, completely changes. But I'm curious how you played the game early on.
I think as a kid, I was just like, wow, let's try to beat this game at all. I don't remember too much of how I played it. Probably just like your normal average person. I know when I was even in my like early teens, I started trying to go fast, partially because I found it easier, especially after I was introduced to speedrunning. I saw people run the game. I was like, that looks easier than actually trying to play the level. I tried some of the tricks and I was right. And so that helped me beat the game finally. I had Deluxe on PlayStation 2, Super Monkey Ball Deluxe, which has 300 levels in the entire game. I think it's actually 310. And like half of them I had just never played before.
Right.
And speedrunning eventually helped me beat that game. So, and then I just built from there. I was like, wow, this is fun. Let's do more of it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the GameCube and that era of gaming was your first experience with gaming, because I'm in my late 30s, so I grew up. Nintendo came out when I was born and stuff, and my transition to 3D games with Nintendo 64, PlayStation, all that era, it was a bit of a challenge for those, because my brain just didn't quite wrap around how to move in 3D space. And one of the things I've really enjoyed about actually playing Super Monkey Ball and games like that nowadays is that it really is actually a great way to explore a 3D space. And I'm trying to imagine if that would have been my first game, because it really it teaches you some really strong fundamentals about moving in that space that I didn't quite grasp when I first started playing those games. And I'm wondering, when you play some of these other games, has your Monkey Ball experience helped you out playing other games? Like, maybe just a speedrunner? I'm always curious if any of that applies to some of the other areas of gaming or other types of games.
I think a little bit. The precision needed is definitely helpful for other games. If nothing else, it's the mentality aspect that is helpful for other speedruns.
Oh, sure.
It's a very unique game, so the skills don't always transfer over, but I do have now practice holding very precise inputs, which I think is helpful.
You mentioned too that basically some of your early experience with speedrunning was live, and that by the way, super awesome and fortunate, because many of us, including myself, didn't have we found a video on YouTube or whatever, or we watch GDQs on when they're live. Is that aspect of doing speedrunnings is so fascinating and interesting to me. When you were there, was there an audience watching at this point? I mean, you mentioned that first run where you're on the couch or on the commentary for this. Were there people actually watching I'm not too familiar with the origins of the ones you're talking about.
There's a few people. There weren't very many. There was a few, mostly friends.
Right.
We at 2DCon 2017, the MidwestSpeedfest room, we shared a room with the tournament space. Or at least part of the tournament space, which, as you can imagine, became a noise issue. There was a Tecmo Bowl tournament going on during Doobie's Donkey Kong Country run, and he missed like a couple audio cues because they were screaming.
I was about to say, do you every other word you hear an F word all of a sudden?
I guess. I don't remember if any of them wanted to over checked it out. I'm sure some of them probably did. I think there was a projector up, so I guess in an environment like that, maybe there weren't a ton of dedicated watchers, but there were at least people walking by and looking at it.
So, you mentioned it. Let's get into it a little bit about Super Monkey Ball. And this game, I still to this day find endlessly challenging. Not just like impossibly challenging, but endlessly. Like it seems like there's always a new challenge to the game. And especially now that there have been more in the series and everything. First of all, what is it that appealed to you about that game to kind of dedicate a majority of your time to?
I think that the super high skill ceiling is really nice. You can always push the envelope in that game, so to speak. You can always go just that little bit faster because it's so precise and you have such clear control over your character. Technically, you control the flow or the direction of gravity, not the character, not the stage tilt, but it works in such a way that you feel like you have complete control over the game. And so the skill ceiling is super, super high. I also really like the stage design. Finding ways to beat the game quickly, whether it's something I've come up with myself or it's watching others do it and implementing their strategies. It's just really fun to mess around with, especially when I play it more and I feel like I understand more about the game, and I can think up even more fun strategies to try. Even if they're not fast, just playing around with the game at this point is so fun to me.
What makes you mentioned the gravity and the controls and just the skill ceiling to it. Are those the things that also make it challenging? I'm curious, like as a speedrunner, what are the challenges that the game presents to you in this unique environment that it's built in?
Again, the precision, the controls, the controls are a little bit challenging, if only because it's basically a joystick controlled game and nothing else. You use the joystick, that's all you do. The camera is a problem occasionally. As a speedrunner of Monkey Ball, it's never really a hindrance. There are very few situations in which it is actually a hindrance, but you do have to learn to work around it sometimes, manipulate it the way you need it to go.
If somebody, I don't think I'm going to go down this path, but I know that there are always people who are interested in finding a speedrun for themselves. Where's like a good place to start if you were to take on Super Monkey Ball as a speedrun game? What's a good thing where's a place to start with it?
Where people normally start is just playing through beginner, trying to play beginner as fast as they can, because that has obviously the easiest levels in the game. I think a lot of people will start playing beginner too without looking at anything first, because the game lends itself so well to going fast. Once you play the game, even at a base level, there are so many stages where there are such obvious skips, and people love to try them. It doesn't matter how good they are at the game, doesn't matter what their goal is, they're just fun to do. And people do those, and the natural progression from that, if they continue to enjoy it, is speedrunning. So they'll start speedrunning the easier categories. And I find that those who keep playing appreciate the room for improvement, because even like they think they're going really fast, and then I show them this one skip on this level that cuts it in half. They're like, what? I didn't even know you could do that.
The skips, there are so many. One of the things that I found fascinating about the run when watching it many times now at this point, but how have some of these things been discovered? It seems like there are still new things being discovered. It seems like every year now we see a Monkey Ball run at an event, and there's this new thing that's happening. So I'm curious, how has the game changed since when you started speedrunning it and before then?
Before then was like early speedruns were actually individual level focused rather than full game runs. People would try to get the best time possible on a single level. And those, obviously those aren't necessarily full game run viable, but some of the stress that we do in full game runs are based off of those. But even for full game runs, it was relatively simple stuff, and got more difficult as people got better. It hasn't changed. Monkey Ball 1 in particular hasn't changed too terribly much since I've started running it. Monkey Ball 2 has, more so. That game is more active just in general, so that makes sense. And Monkey Ball 1 also has simpler level design, so there's less to optimize in general, but we've still found new pause strats and such, and I know I need to explain this now.
Yeah.
Pause strats. Cool. Let me back up a little bit. So there's a timer in-game, and if you pause, the pause menu comes up immediately the frame you press the button. Then you can tell what frame you are on in-game by looking at that in-game timer. So if you do the exact same inputs on the exact same frame, you will always get the same result. So when I pause, I'm looking for a specific frame on the timer, and then I hold a direction, specific direction using my GameCube controller's notches to sort of guide me there. And then I unpause to get these really specific inputs. Basically, I'm being a TAS in real time.
It sounds like it. Yeah, it sounds like the frame input, the frame perfect input.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that lets us do these things that would otherwise be basically impossible, TAS-only things. And you are wasting a little bit of time because you're pausing the game, but the strats that you can do sometimes save upwards of 10 seconds, which in Monkey Ball is very, very much, because we're talking about stages that are like 5 seconds. So a lot of those new pause strats have been found lately. They're getting very ridiculous. Some of the ones that have been found that people aren't even doing in runs because they're so absurd are 5-frame strats. So you have to hit 5 specific frames. This game runs at 60 FPS, so It's a little bit easier than it sounds because you can, when you press B, the pause menu goes away right away, and you can press start to bring it back up again immediately. So you can press B start to advance almost frame by frame, and that helps a little bit. But it's still very challenging. 5 frames is getting to the point where your consistency dramatically drops. And so the fact that these strategies, multiple of them even exist, and now the fact that time they save is getting lower and lower. We're talking about like 1 second if your pausing is going at like the near the end of the run. It's so ridiculous.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, these are strats that like I don't even do. And another aspect of optimization, at least for Monkey Ball, is removing pauses where possible. Because like I said, it is slower because you're pausing the game. And so there is an effort to try to shave pauses off of pause strats or even do parts of the pause strat without actually pausing if they're just lenient enough. Generally, if something is like a 3 or 4 frame window, we can relatively reliably hit it without pausing at this point. There's also something called insta-pausing, which is just bringing up the start menu super fast, and like sometimes not even checking the timer, just using it, letting your brain process the information as you're playing after you've already unpaused, and then reacting and doing the strat according to what you saw. Stuff like that. We're getting into like very technical, mentality-focused optimizations in some of these strats. A lot of this is Monkey Ball 2, though. Monkey Ball 1 doesn't have as many opportunities because the stages are smaller, but as a whole, I could go for days about that.
No, but that's fascinating because it actually. So you mentioned the skills that needed to happen to speedrun the game, but then also there's decision-making process because you're presented a decision to be made when you mentioned reacting to whatever, frame you're on or based on that. And I gotta be honest, one of the things that didn't quite come across, I wasn't quite aware of that you're doing something different based on, I thought you might have been just pausing for a specific moment, but the fact that you can make a different decision, that's actually fast. That probably makes the speedrun endlessly interesting too, because a speedrun's going to feel different probably every time, I would imagine.
Relatively, yeah. Okay. It doesn't come up too terribly often.
Got it. Okay.
Some of the pause strats just don't have that opportunity because they're so precise. Only 1 frame even works. But I'm thinking like a stage is like reversible gear in Monkey Ball 2, which is World 3, Stage 2, I believe. Stuff like that. There are also backups to pause strats. So like if I'm going for a frame and I miss it, then I can get on a backup set and still get maybe a slightly slower version of it. Something like that. So those helps too, and then that does play into decision making. Like, do I want to try and pause this really fast because I know there are backups, or do I want to make sure I'm getting the fastest possible set of pause frames? Stuff like that.
Right. You mentioned it a little bit earlier, and I think it's worth revisiting a bit because so often I hear or I see in comments and things like that is, man, how do you go about finding these strats? How do you find these glitches? How do you find these tricks in the game? And as somebody who, you mentioned I just like trying things. How does that process actually happen? And maybe it is that simple because I think there are a group of people that, well, in fact, I know glitch hunters are a perfect example where they run the game, but they're not competing for the top spot or whatever. They're the thing they enjoy doing is just breaking the game. So I'm curious, what's kind of your process to go through that? Is it as simple?
Yeah, more or less. A lot of us have a very good idea of how the game works, what will happen when we try something. So we get an idea in our heads and go try it immediately, and we can usually tell pretty quickly if it's going to work or not. Or if we don't get it within a certain amount of tries, it's probably not consistent enough for full game runs. Maybe it's viable for individual levels. Pause frames are a little bit more in-depth, as you can imagine, because this is more procedurally checking through a set of inputs and a set of frames, almost like tassing. But even that's not too bad because, like I said, we know we know what we expect to happen, and we can tell pretty easily whether the strat we're looking for is going to work or not. So it's more just sort of advancing by extremes, checking this frame and then maybe checking a frame 20 frames later, and then maybe one of them works, one of them doesn't, and we check closer to the second one. We find a range of frames that could work, and we check all of those in that. But by then it's only like maybe 8 frames, if even that. And then it becomes, get this frame, hold this input, does it work? No? All right, move on to the next one. And it goes by pretty quick once you know what you're expecting. So it's not terrible. It just takes somebody having an idea and the knowledge of the game to try to put it into practice, really.
And you mentioned it, the fact that you can pause the game and know basically where you are frame wise in the game. That's a really nice piece of information that not every game has access to. So, I'm not too familiar with the GameCube itself. Are there tasking tools available? Do people have people tasked out the game at this point?
Absolutely. The emulator for it, Dolphin, the GameCube Wii emulator, is actually, from what I know, rather task friendly. Cyclops Dragon is a big tasker in the scene who has done lots of work on the vanilla games and has been more working on custom levels now, trying to make those as fast as possible, which I know is something you wanted to get at later, sort of if there are any hacks for the game, which there are very many at this point. But yeah, the task tools are pretty solid. I know there's been 1 or 2 people trying to get themselves into it as well, some new taskers, and I'm really excited to see what they will accomplish.
If I play a GameCube or a Wii game, I bust out the GameCube or Wii, but I've recently just gone back to Dolphin to try out some things, and Dolphin's amazing. If a complete just short aside, what Dolphin is, Dolphin's been around for years now, but what you're able to do, it's scaling. It has so much development done to it right now. It's incredibly stable, and it really can take advantage if you've got some hardware and stuff. It's amazing what Dolphin can, the net play, everything about it. I've just been really blown away by it for what it does.
Ridiculously good, and the fact that people have been able to make like their own offshoots of Dolphin for like the Smash related projects, like they gave Melee rollback netcode. Are you kidding me? That's so cool.
It's so wild.
Stuff like that.
People can play competitively using Dolphin. It's wild. So yes. Anyway, complete aside. What's the difference between? I noticed that in fact, I think all of the leaderboard, most people have played Super Monkey Ball, the first one. They play it on Wii. Why on Wii versus the original GameCube?
Loads are very slightly faster. That's it.
Okay, so it's a simple loading thing.
I think people in general have more access to the Wii. If you look at the sales numbers, the Wii has sold over 100 million units, and the GameCube has sold like 30 million, if I have my numbers right. So the Wii is just exponentially more popular. Every family has a Wii in their home. But even so, it ends up being the optimal console. It doesn't matter as much for Monkey Ball 1. It matters a lot more for Monkey Ball 2, especially story mode. Loads are more prevalent in that category, but slightly faster. There you go.
And that makes a lot of sense. What happened? What were the changes made to Super Monkey Ball 2? Because I know you also run that as well, and you mentioned that that's a little bit more active community right now. What changes? What did they change in the sequel?
First of all, I think the reason it's more active, this doesn't really answer your question, but I will answer it in a minute.
Yeah.
I think the reason it's more active is because it's simply a more popular game. Sega and Amusement Vision sort of rode the wave of the first one. We're like, all right, let's make the second one. Let's make it, the stage is grander in scale. Let's put some nice quality of life stuff on it. Let's give it a bit more polish. And that game caught on a bit more, and I think people enjoy it a bit more. It is a better casual game, in my opinion. As to the differences, most notably, you will notice this if you start playing a lot of both games, is that the camera turns more slowly in Monkey Ball 2, which is really interesting. The camera angle is also different. It's from a higher perspective, whereas in Monkey Ball 1, it's a little bit lower. This helps immensely with like falling strats and such. It also pans down more when you're in the air. Monkey Ball 1's camera is incapable of pointing straight down, I believe, whereas I'm pretty sure Monkey Ball 2's can't. That actually messes me up once in a while when I'm switching back and forth. Not usually, but it does happen. There are also, Monkey Ball 2 is like more party games and all that stuff. I think I've alluded to this, but Monkey Ball 2 stages, actually, I did just say this, but they're grander in scale, like much more so. They often have these starting platforms too, which are, some of them are pretty long, and then you end up having a technique called wall boosting, is where we sort of roll up against the walls to get some air and like decrease friction and all that. And those walls have some unique properties. There's some funny stuff they can do, and that is simply not prevalent in Monkey Ball 1. So that adds a whole new dimension to some of these stages. You can get bad walls, and all of a sudden you have to do a different version of the strat, stuff like that. Whereas in Monkey Ball 1, that is just not a thing. That's one of the biggest differences to me.
That's really interesting with the slight variation on the camera. I would imagine, you'd probably just take because you've already built an engine, why not just use the same thing? So the fact they made that's kind of interesting that they made that slight difference. And I got to imagine that could be, you'd feel that as a speedrunner.
Absolutely. The engine is the same. They use the same engine, but it's only the camera. It's
only the camera. Wow, interesting. Okay, so
as far as I know.
Okay,
I think there might be some sort of like collision differences. I think you get very slightly higher bounces in one game, but the engine is virtually the same. A casual player would not notice. But yeah, we speedrunners absolutely notice. It still throws me off. Not for very long anymore, for just a little bit. I have to get used to the new game. Right. I've become very good at swapping between them, thankfully, and most people who play both have. The skills do transfer over. It's not always as hard as it seems. Another difference that I forgot to mention is Monkey Ball 1 has very strict requirements for getting to the extra stages and master stages. You can't get to them in Monkey Ball 1 if you lose lives, basically. In beginner, you have to complete the base 10 beginner stages without losing a single life to get to the extra stages. Same goes for advanced, and those are 30 base stages. Expert is a bit more lenient. You can't use a continue, which you start off with your basic 3 lives per continue. You can get more. 100 bananas is a 1-up. But if you use a continue, that's it. You're barred from the extra stages. There are 10 extra stages, and if you beat those, also without using a continue, then you get to master, which are some of the hardest levels in Monkey Ball history, really. But so many people never see that. And so there's actually a difference between the Monkey Ball 1 and 2 boards. Because in Monkey Ball 2, you can buy up to 99 lives, and you don't really have that restriction. So in Monkey Ball 1, there's a category called Expert, where you play the base 50 stages in Expert. That's it. Then there's Master, where you go on through Master. And of course, you have to not die to even finish that run. Whereas in Monkey Ball 2, there is an Expert category, but it goes through Master because you don't have that life restriction. So, and then there's a Master category as well. But in Monkey Ball 2, they sort of split Expert and Master into 2 separate difficulties. So you can play, once you unlock it, you can play just Master. So that's what Master is in Monkey Ball 2, is just Master, as opposed to Expert through Master. And Expert through Master becomes Expert. It's weird.
I'm glad you highlighted that, because I got to tell you how much I appreciate developers taking that extra time to put in those stages, because I'd have to imagine, I don't know for sure, but I'd have to imagine that a very small percentage of people are actually going to play the game that way to get to those stages. I just recently unlocked a pro mode in one of the games I speedrun in Pac-Land, and the fact that the game itself is challenging to begin with. Then you put a new difficulty on top of that. I got to tell you how much I appreciate that, because it gives the game extra replay value, just playable value. And they did, for considering not a lot of people are going to play those, that's really cool that something like that exists. And I imagine as a speedrunner, it's great. Okay, good. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why Monkey Ball 2 is more popular. It's simply more accessible.
Right.
And that's another reason I think it's a better casual game than Monkey Ball 1.
Mm-hmm. No, and that makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask, but I think you just kind of answered it. If somebody wanted to get into Super Monkey Ball, would you recommend they start with 2, or should they maybe would it make more sense to start with 1? Like, where if you want to get into this, where do you think might be the place to enter?
There's an argument to be made for starting from the first game, just because it's the first game. But yeah, Monkey Ball 2 is probably a bit more beginner friendly. Though I feel like Monkey Ball 2 has more. What is a word here that isn't vulgar?
No, it's okay.
It has more unfair levels.
Bullshit. You can say it. It just has more bullshit.
Oh, okay. Word.
Yeah.
Cool.
No, it's totally
fine.
No, that's the one thing I don't mind busting it out for the podcast. We're chatting, so it's totally fine.
Fair enough.
Yeah, no, and that's totally fair, right? I mean, that's a real thing, especially if you're wanting to just get into speedrunning. That's a real thing. You got to watch out for some of those things. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's not to say Monkey Ball 1 doesn't have its fair share, because it does. But I feel like it has a little bit less, but that's probably overshadowed by the fact that you just can't reach Master. But then I say, if you want to run Monkey Ball 1, run one of the non-extra categories. The category I started with was all difficulties, no extras, warpless, which is a mouthful, but it's very descriptive. I played through all of the difficulties, but don't take any of the master stages or any of the extra or master stages. And it's actually very fun and a really good starting out category.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one of the things that kind of struck me when I was checking out the leaderboards. I do some research before we chatted and stuff, and there are quite a few for both games. And where do you start with that? But that's a really great point. You don't have to necessarily start with the category that has the most people, who've submitted runs or whatever. This sounds like a great starting category.
Yeah, that's especially if you want to go for like more long form runs. Whereas if you're starting with beginner, that's basically a sprint. That is. In Monkey Ball 1, that's like a minute and a half. It becomes very optimized at top level to the point where I don't even really want to play it anymore. It's so difficult now to get all the strats. But yeah, like if you're starting out with speedrunning, you don't care about leaderboard time though.
One thing I noticed, and we didn't actually talk about it, but you mentioned the in-game timer. And is the game as a speedrun timed RTA, or is it timed with the in-game timer? Like, how do you... because you mentioned there was also single segment runs that people used to do and things like that. So I'm curious how it how's it done nowadays?
Full game runs are RTA.
Okay.
I guess to do in-game timer, we'd have to add up all of the individual level times, which would get really tedious, and that wouldn't account for deaths.
Oh yes,
yeah, that'd be a mess.
Good point. Yeah,
that'd be a big mess.
What?
But
the
I think
Sonic
RTA
folks, a lot of the Sonic folks, they just added on to, but just thinking about it, when I was running Sonic 2, I was just, it took me, I had to think through adding up 33 plus, whatever for my deaths and stuff like that. You're right. It can be a hassle.
Yeah, for sure. It's especially when some of these categories have hundreds of levels. Right. Oh no, okay, you're going to be timing that with RTA anyway to see if you PV'd. So.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Totally makes sense.
Yeah. Easier for the mods too, so I don't have to do all that work either to verify.
Oh, that could be a nightmare. The hacks. So there is a hacking scene, and I've actually watched some of your videos of actually playing through some of the hacks, which look awesome and some of them even look similar in design to the originals. What are some of the ones that you prefer, and where can people, what are some of the ones you might recommend to get started, and what makes them unique and different?
So first of all, there are hacks for Monkey Ball 1, but they're few and far between. And the things you can do in that game, there are fewer things you can do in that game. This is what I should have said. Yeah. Monkey Ball 2 is where really the bulk of the hacks are, and that's where the best ones are. The top 3, I would say, are Monkeyed Ball 2 in particular, the second one. This is monkeyed past tense. So Monkeyed Ball 2, witty subtitle. There is Super Monkey Ball 651 and Super Monkey Ball Gaiden. Monkey Ball 2 is by Twilight, formerly known as Bytes. 651 is by Scrap 651, and Gaiden is by Deadly Cutsman. They all were like revolutionary for their time. I think Monkey Ball 2 was like 2018. 651 is 2019, and Gaiden is 2020, I believe. Yeah, Monkey Ball 2 is like almost Monkey Ball 3, basically. It's very faithful to Monkey Ball 1 and 2. It's partly the reason why I like it so much. It does get very difficult toward the end. All of these do, because they are partially made for people who are already familiar with the game and are looking for more of a challenge. 651 is so difficult. World 10 in particular, it's a completely story mode hack, whereas Monkey Ball 2 is story and challenge. But 651 is so difficult that we are keeping a running tally of the people who have beaten World 10. I think we're up to 20 individual people by now.
Oh, that's a good sign.
if you really want to get your hands dirty and play something challenging, that's the one you go to. And the beginning worlds of it aren't too hard, though. You can have a lot of fun with that one, even if you're not quite good enough to beat it. Gaiden is also quite difficult, but that one adds in a lot more mechanics and things like that does some really creative stuff and has some very large long-form levels. So if you're looking for almost a completely new experience, that's the one you want to go to. They're all very good. They all have their high points. Probably all worth playing.
Are all three of those creators speedrunners of the original Monkey Ball 2?
I don't... Cutsman is not, as far as I know. I don't remember if Twilight used to. I think a little bit, and probably maybe a little bit for Cutsman too. Scrap, though, is one of, if not the best IL runner in the game.
Oh, cool.
Does some absolutely absurd things. Doesn't do full game runs very often. but the individual level times this person puts up are just so good.
One of the things I noticed about both Monkey Ball and Monkey Ball 2 was that when you get good at the game, you kind of basically become a speedrunner of the game.
Yeah.
The way that the game is just built and designed that way. And so, but I wanted to, we've had ROM hackers and people who do these kind of things, create their own levels and stuff like that for games before. And not all of them are necessarily speedrunners, which I thought was really cool. Some people do enjoy just, hey, what would the next game look like? And so their very thoughtful design goes into starting with the beginner. And maybe this is kind of maybe where you started off from the last game and kind of thing. And I really appreciate that kind of design in the game, because it makes it, if you've played through Monkey Ball 1 and 2 casually, you could probably go through this type of thing. And I noticed that might have been that might be the case in some of these. So I thought that was pretty cool.
They do get very difficult, especially for a casual player. But yeah, like you said, the beginning worlds, the beginning few levels are, anybody could play them, really. It's very nice. I had another point here, and my train of thought has unfortunately crashed and burned.
I'm sorry.
I suppose. Oh, no. I can bring up the compilation packs. The most recent one being, I think, Community Level Workshop Community Pack 2020. Something like that. Which is a compilation of a bunch of stages from various creators. Lots of them were retextured to look a little bit better, to sort of fit in more, and it's very well done. So not only, like, you don't have to play one of these 3 almost themed packs if you don't want to. There are plenty of compilation packs. There's even other stuff. There are like 4 NGUU packs, NGUU being the creator. There's Super Hecka Mecha by Metallica, which is a really short one that's really good. Yeah. I also think, I remember the point I was going to get at, is that while a lot of these ROM hacks might be more difficult, they are more fair because a little bit more care is taken into making sure that they are. And, they are very thoroughly play tested, at least in most cases. A lot of the devs of these ROM hacks will work with speedrunners to make sure it's fun for casuals and speedrunners alike. Stuff like that. Sometimes there are some unfortunate mishaps or whatever that happens. Maybe we find a strat that actually sucks, but it's really fast, so we just have to do it. Things like that. Another thing that these ROM hacks do, some of them anyway, is disable pausing or make it in some way so you can't do pause strats. Because that is seen as an exploit by some members of the community, which is fair. It's a completely different way of playing the game, and it's a completely different skill set. I respect both pauseless and paused for sure. They have to be very talented to do either. But yeah, it's certainly an exploit, and so some ROM hack authors will decide to disable that in some way. And I think that's neat too. That also makes speedrunning these games fundamentally different, or speedrunning these hacks fundamentally different.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's a really cool thing about just speedrunning or playing through games again, is that you can play it any way you intend to. And the fact that somebody is enabling or disabling, in this case, some extra functionality of the game or some functionality of the game, I think that's a fascinating way to do it. I think I think it also keeps the game alive. Like, there are people who care about it enough to create something new for the game, which is really cool. It's super interesting.
There are hacks being worked on probably as we speak right now.
That is so cool. And you mentioned some of the playtesting, and I think that actually lends itself to my next question, in that, so right now on screen, it's your AGDQ 2020 run, and there are many different things I love about this run, but one is the level of gameplay that's being displayed. You're running the game at a very high level, which is obvious just from the start, which is really cool. But then number 2, almost equally as important, is you've got this wonderful couch and just going ape poo-poo for a lot of the run, and all of a sudden I was just as excited as they were. I mean, admittedly I was volunteering, so I'm up on stage, maybe that helps out, but I've watched it back as a video now, and it really comes across on the VOD that there's this obvious community that is supporting what's going on here. Could you talk a little bit about the Monkey Ball community and what it's like to be a part of it?
It's fun. A lot of us, sit down and just play. We'll do races, we'll do ILs together, we'll work together on strats, obviously. It's a relatively supportive community, which is very nice. there are some different subsets of it, and those don't always interact the best, but that's kind of what happens with most communities, unfortunately.
Yes, niches
But
upon niches.
Yeah, I think we've been doing a good job lately of sort of keeping our own boundaries, making sure things don't get heated, and supporting one another where we can. Even the people who don't necessarily get along will and can support each other sometimes, which is very helpful. The people on the couch in particular, some of them aren't even like monkey ball speedrunners. Like the famous yellow shirt guy is actually Jaxler, who's not even a monkey ball speedrunner, just one of my good friends.
It's a good invite.
Like, absolutely.
And what was that experience like? I mean, there's just there's just all that energy and everything up on stage.
I don't even know how to explain it. It was like living a dream, but even better. I really have to thank that couch. I do this every opportunity I get for helping push that run over the top. I am very thankful that it was very well received, and part of that is their doing, absolutely. The commentary for the members of the couch who are mic'd up was fantastic, and the two on the sides, Jaxler and Zojalix, who were just freaking out, really helped with just the overall excitement in the room, and that was really cool too.
It's one of those things that if you're ever fortunate enough to get a run at a live event like this, or there's a bunch of other ones as well now. I mean, back in the day when we could actually go to live events, it has all the elements that I think that make up a great live run, and that's the gameplay, obviously, but then the energy and the excitement. So as a viewer, like an audience member, I didn't really know exactly what I was watching, but based on the commentary from the couch and the excitement that they had for it, I always knew if something was going well or what to cheer for. And I think that it's really inviting as a viewer to like that's how I got involved in it. I was caught up in it. I was swept up in the excitement of it. And so putting all that together, I think was it really came together quite well. It was really, really awesome. If you haven't watched the run, I'd recommend everyone go watch it. It's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm sure my couch does too. Although I don't mean this in a negative way at all, but you have no idea what to cheer for. Nobody does. Nobody who is unfamiliar with the game has any idea what to cheer for. It's hilarious. Every single GDQ monkey ball run, someone does what is actually like a really easy trick. It just looks really flashy and people freak out. And that's perfectly fine. That is okay.
Well,
there is nothing wrong with that. And I think that speaks to just how good of like a spectator game it is.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the things I wanted to mention too. One of the things I really appreciate you did is you went for a lot of these really hard tricks. And I understand, I'm not faulting anybody for going for the marathon safe strats. I've done it myself when I've done these runs. But there is something really exciting about going for things that take 3 or 4 times. And yes, you're sacrificing a PB or whatever. But it's so much more exciting when you actually do hit it. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so great. Any nerves going for some of those?
Yes.
Okay.
I was very, very nervous because that was my first GDQ run even.
Oh, wow.
It wasn't, I've alluded to this earlier, but it wasn't my first marathon run, but it was my first GDQ run, probably my first showing of any kind in front of a group that large. And something that I had been looking forward to since I learned I was going to do it. I took the trip out there for that reason, essentially. I live in Minnesota, and that was in Florida, so that was across the country. So yeah, there were a lot of nerves. I just sort of had to remind myself that it's going to be fine. Like, I'm really good at this game. If I make a mistake, I know how to play it off because I've had experience with other marathons. I have experience doing commentary, and I have an excellent couch to back me up.
Right.
So it wasn't too bad, but there were some times during the run where I was visibly nervous, and that's okay. That happens. I think the gameplay was still pretty solid. And as you said, the difficult stuff I go for, and sometimes failing it, pitching myself off the stage to try it again. I just love doing that because it doesn't actually waste that much time. My estimate is usually pretty generous, so I can afford to do these things and show off exactly what makes this speed game so cool.
Yes.
I've always said that marathons are less about getting the best possible time and more about entertainment and driving donations. And that's what I tried to put forth in that run. And I think it showed.
I couldn't agree with you more. And GDQ did a panel about why they accept and what they accept. You know, why does the game committee select a certain game? And first and foremost is do they believe that this could actually support the making more money for the charity? Like we are trying to raise money for these good causes, and we're going to get to it here in just a second. So the fact that you have something like this, where first of all the run's, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes, so you have a good chunk of time. You want to incentivize, you want to get people excited about, you know, supporting this great cause. And I really think that it did that quite well.
I think so too. Also the support that came out from my friends and the communities that I'm involved in also helped raise money. But not only that, I appreciate it immensely. It's just really cool to see.
So that's actually a perfect segue. Tell us a little bit about Midwest Speedfest, the actual, you know, now that you've been a staff for a few years now, I think. And, you know, what got you, I mean, we've learned the origin story. What keeps you hooked, and why do you enjoy doing and being on staff and working for this marathon?
I think at this point, I'm one of the oldest staff on the team. Not in terms of age. I'm actually the youngest staff in terms of age. I'm going to make everyone here feel old.
Yes, yes. You don't have to say it's okay. It's just,
Yeah, no. This Midwest Speedfest feels like a community I belong in. It's the local people doing speedruns, and we're all good friends. It's a very inclusive community. It's just fun. It's a good time. I think part of the reason we hold speedrun marathons is because they're fun. It actually got started in 2015 at 2DCon 2015. I believe the only person who is part of that original inaugural marathon who is still on staff is Sex Rex. And they and a few others were like, hey, if we went to 2DCon and we started speedrunning in a corner, would you kick us out? And then we're like, no, we'll actually give you a dedicated room and make you like an attraction. Huge shout outs to 2DCon because they have kept that support up all these years, and we are very, very grateful for it. Without 2DCon, there would be no Speedfest, at least not in this form. Yeah, that's part of the reason why. It's fun to go to a convention and just put on a speedrun event. Whether you're doing a run, whether you're helping set things up, whether you're just hanging out, it's a good time.
I got to say, one of the things about being part of a different, a bigger or different event while you're doing a speedrunning event is you never know who's going to walk by. And I've only had this experience once, but you never, people see this, people who are there for video games know what, you know, being good at a video game means and how challenging that can be. So while they may not be familiar with speedrunning, the fact that you might get strangers, you know, just walking by, checking this thing out, that's pretty cool. And that's still, if we ever go back to in person, I assume that'll still be a thing. Will Midwest Speedfest be in person at some point again? Yes,
absolutely. We are in the planning stages for Midwest Speedfest 2021. Fingers crossed I'm not going to go too in depth about that, but fingers crossed.
Sure. Yes, we all, yes. COVID, thank you.
Hopefully things are safe.
What did they, now does Midwest Speedfest change their charity partner, or do they always support one? How does the charity aspect of it work?
Yeah, we change it just about every marathon. We also partner with VGMCon in like the winter, spring, around there. 2DCon is in the summer, late summer, almost always August. Anyway, we basically assist them in raising funds for whatever their chosen charity is. And then in the off seasons, when we have like our online events, then we choose whatever, just staff consensus, basically. We've raised money for a lot of different organizations at this point. And oh boy, we've had Carbon Fund, we've had Sweet Relief, which raises funds for, it was actually our most recent marathon, raises funds for musicians that are out of work due to disability or illness or some other reason. Just loads of different charities. I'm sure we've had one of the charities akin to like Prevent Cancer Foundation, stuff like that. Lots of causes. We make sure that they are things that staff feels passionate about too, and that only increases our motivation to put on a good marathon.
After watching some of the VODs and seeing the event that you just recently wrapped up, was it last weekend or the weekend before?
Was it last weekend? Time is a blur.
I know. I think it was last weekend.
Yeah.
But I mean, really good number. I mean, raised over $10,000. Like I really, by the way, appreciate it. It seems like there's this really dedicated group of people keeping this thing alive, which is awesome. But then secondly, still the fact that you're able to raise 10 grand everyone's at home. We're not we don't have the kind of things that we might normally have is I think are really awesome and is keeping the thing alive.
We've really grown our community as of late too, both locally and online. Like we have so much interest in our next in-person event. We're gonna need a bigger room.
That's a good problem. That's a good problem to have.
Yeah. And our online events have grown so much, even over the past couple of years. We've even raised funds for a local charity, a food shelf, just like local to some of our staff members.
That's cool.
And even that did pretty well. People are happy to support, which is very much appreciated. And we're always eager to grow this community. Part of the reason that happened is because Gooby himself went on to speedrun.com and sorted by people who live in the Midwest and just started reaching out to them. We're like, hey, we're hosting this speedrun marathon. If you're interested, here are some details. Submit a run if you want. Stuff like that. And now that we have grown so much, partially because of that, word starts spreading. People start inviting their friends. And now we are we're raising over $10,000 for charity and having 4-day events with super stacked schedules.
It's for so real. Cool. Well, so there have been a handful of people I've had on we've talked about. I'm really big on the charity thing. Like that's the whole reason I got involved in GDQ and everything like that. Super MC's talked about Zeldathon. Shasta's talked about Calithon. All these, these are great things. Just raising for good causes and all that kind of stuff. If somebody wants to get involved, like you shared your story a little bit, how could they do that nowadays? And what's the kind of commitment? Because I know that can be a bit intimidating, or maybe you're not sure about how much work it can kind of take behind the scenes.
There's much less work per person behind the scenes now. We've really expanded our volunteer team lately. So we have volunteer applications for every event. They open like right after the schedule drops, so we can, for hosts specifically, schedule them with runs.
Cool.
Yeah, for a lot of volunteers, it's no more than 2-3 shifts per weekend of like 6 hours max, ideally. Sometimes more, sometimes less. It depends what staff we have, what people are willing to do, what people's availability looks like, But yeah, even a huge load has been taken off of staff lately, which, as many of us are wearing multiple hats, we appreciate. I in particular, I manage our Twitter, just social media in general, and I am our head of hosting. So I'm over here wearing 2 hats. We have like one dedicated tech person, kind of 2 dedicated tech people at this point. There's Gooby, who does runner contacting and a bunch of other stuff, communicates with the charities that we're doing. We have Newt, who does runner spotlight and stuff, which is basically this podcast format, interview runners.
Yeah.
We do that once in a while on the channel. We have someone making our website, and then also who does volunteer stuff for us. Well, he is on staff, so I shouldn't be calling it. Well, no, it is still volunteer things. None of us are getting paid, but
yeah, right.
And that's perfectly fine. We're happy to do it. It's raising money for charity and having a good time, like I said. So, but yeah, if you're looking to just volunteer, it's not huge. You won't have to take on a huge load. With the amount of volunteers and the amount of support we've had recently, it's not too bad. And we'd love to have anybody on, really.
My experience has been as well that we're very thankful to just have people volunteer. So we're willing to work if you can only give up a few hours, during your weekend or whatever it may be. We absolutely, we'll take anybody, not anybody, but I mean, we're very fortunate to have some of those things kind of happen. So, by the way,
Absolutely.
My dog is snoring. So if you hear any weird buzzing sounds in the background, that's just the dogs. She is being so loud right now. Sorry about that.
I'm actually not hearing a thing.
Okay, so cool. I wasn't quite sure. I heard it. I'm like, oh my gosh. So that's, I'm glad that you're doing what you're doing with Midwest Speedfest, because first of all, I think it's really cool to have local events like that. I mentioned Calithon earlier, but those have been sprinkling up all over the place. And now you've mentioned it. You've been doing it for years. And I think that's so cool that there isn't just one event. There's all these great ways that you can help get involved, or that you can even just watching is a great way to support some of these great causes. And they're happening all over the United States and other places. We're in Europe and all those other around the world as well. So
watch it, share it with your friends, volunteer if you can, submit runs. Even if you don't get a run in, or even if you have to miss this one event for any reason, there are so many more opportunities at this point. And a lot of these marathons are like working with each other now. Sometimes to try and make sure we don't schedule over each other, sometimes to help out with other events, you know, like Midwest Speedfest has been working with Calathon on some of their events, just sort of saying, hey, if any people who are volunteering for Speedfest want to go help out Calathon, vice versa. Just so many marathons work together at this point. And I feel like marathon organizers is becoming a community in and of itself, which is really funny, but also really useful.
Yes.
And you can totally get involved with that. Just start volunteering. Even if you want to start your own marathon, go for it.
It's true. And, you know, you may not start out with Midwest Speedfest numbers. You may not start out with Calathon speedrun, viewing numbers and stuff. That doesn't matter. The fact is you're raising money for a good cause, or perhaps you're showcasing a community that you want to showcase. It doesn't always, I think this is important because Retrothon's going on right now and I'm a fan, and, you know, they're doing a highlight of the community. They're not raising money for a charity and stuff. And that's still a great way to support a community of people. So, you know, it doesn't have to be one or the other or anything like that, you know? So
yeah, it's first and foremost to have fun with it. That's, I think, the gist of speedrun marathons.
Totally agree.
It's fun to organize them. It is fun to put together schedules. It's like schedules of speedrunning and say, oh, look at all this cool stuff we now have. Look at all this cool stuff that people are going to get to see. Fun to help raise money if that's what you've chosen to do. Fun to just hang out with people, first and foremost.
So glad you mentioned that, because there is a good chance that if you're into the same things, you're going to find people who are into the same things as you. And that is such a great part of the whole thing too. I think that's probably why I continue to do all these events and stuff like that. Cause I'm like, I get to be around people who are into speedrunning and retro and charity, and I'm like, okay, I'm in, sold. Sign me up.
Same here.
Very cool. One of the things that I wanted to chat about too, and so after viewing your speed runs and things like that, I started following you on Twitter. This is probably maybe a year or two ago, and I really appreciated your thoughtfulness into some of the things that you tweet about and how well you articulated some ideas, obviously that I agree with and that I have had in my own head, but haven't been able to type them out. I talk about this quite often. I just can't translate to fingers, and I'm specifically talking about, you know, things that are happening, especially in the United States, but all over the world, which are, you know, human rights, things like this. And I first and foremost, I guess, how it takes an act of courage, in my opinion, to tweet about some of the things you've tweeted about. And I'm wondering how, you know, you've gone about, like, how do you build up that courage to do that? Because I've always got concerned that, man, if I type something or say something, I might say it wrong, or, you know, how does that happen? How do you get the guts to do something like that?
It's difficult. And for everybody, it's, excuse me, for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to have to sniffle.
Please, not a problem.
All right. Anyway, yeah, like I said, it's going to be different for everybody, but part of it for me is that these are issues I deeply care about. A lot of them are impacting my friends, sometimes even myself. In some situations, it's if you have a certain viewpoint, a certain harmful viewpoint, then I don't want you in my community anyway. So, all right, I'll send a tweet. Like I said, these are things that in some cases mean a lot to me. So yeah, I also feel like with the platform that I have, even though it's not terribly big, it's there. And if I help educate or help support even one person, it's worth it. So that's another reason.
This has come up quite a bit on this podcast. So anybody who listens to this or watches this already knows where I'm going with this, but you've created a welcoming space, to say the least, with your Twitch channel, your live stream, and your speedrunning. And I've learned that you have to be active to create a welcoming space. And when I say that, I mean for people of color, for people who are LGBTQIA+, all these different communities. It's not something that you can just say, oh, you know, I'm going to welcome everybody. You actually have to be active about it. To your point, if somebody's being an asshole or just being, you know, for whatever reason, you have to be active about, you know, making sure that isn't tolerated. And I'm curious how you've gone about creating that space, because after watching your stream more than once now, I've noticed that it's really welcoming. It's a very friendly place. What kind of like thoughtfulness have you had to put into that to make it happen?
It's like you said, getting rid of the people who are being harmful and making it clear that that stuff is not tolerated whatsoever. But also just trying to be open, trying to make it clear that something is going on, or if you have a concern, or if you're LGBTQIA plus or a person of color or what have you, just want a place to hang out, my community is open. That, and also not forcing anything. You're not forcing people to talk about things, not just, I don't know. Yeah. Not forcing anything. Letting people feel like they can be themselves is big. Just hanging out and sharing a common interest, really. The only issue is if someone is being hateful, and then we can deal with it. I am lucky to have a team of really helpful moderators who can deal with that if I'm busy, stuff like that.
I think that's a really good point. Even if I even started doing this, even when I don't stream to many people to begin with, but even if there's only 3 or 4 people watching, having somebody in the chat that you can trust and that sees things the way that you do, in that, they would, you get comfortable with a moderator who might be willing to take some of the actions you might be able to, but you can't because you're speedrunning, because it's really tough to do anything other than speedrun when you're speedrunning. So.
Yeah.
So that's a really good piece of advice, I think, as well. That actually really helps out quite a bit.
They're basically all close friends of mine, people I know I can trust.
So for somebody like me, I think it's pretty obvious, but there's a bit of an age gap between you and I. And that's also one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because I think it's so interesting. The monkey ball community seems to skew a little bit more towards people your age, because we probably grew up with it, things like that.
Used to not.
Did it really? Wow, really?
Yeah, it's only recently, I feel like, has that been the case. Only the past 3-4 years. Maybe
that
even
is so
not that
cool.
many.
I was going to ask about that, and I try not to. It's really tough. I don't want to differentiate people by age and stuff, but I was around when Super Mario Bros. 3 came out. Not every there's a lot of people who speedrun who were not alive at that point. So I think it's interesting.
I might be a little bit wrong because I wasn't in the community. Because I know there are people who were in the community in 2013 who were like teenagers, but even then, a lot of the people who I just don't see anymore were on the older side. A lot of people now, even a lot of the top runners, like a lot of us are like in college. The current world record holder, Complex Plane, is like in Monkey Ball 2 story mode, is like in college. These are people like my age, most of them. A lot of the top runners now at this point.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's still a few here and there who are in their 30s and whatnot. Yeah, I think a lot of it is what you said. People just grew up with this game.
Right.
And as people get older, as they have, spent their time running it, they move on to other speedruns, they move on to other aspects of their life. I think that's just going to be common in just about any community, just constant shuffling of people and ages and whatnot.
That's a really good point, and I've gotten less surprised about it, or been less stereotyping, I guess is what it is, really, honestly. And I shouldn't be doing that in the first place. But don't assume that any one game has a certain age group associated with it. It's one of the mistakes actually I made when I first started watching Twitch, probably 14 or 15, 2000, that era. I assumed everyone was like 14 years old, was awesome at gaming, and I was not going to fit in at all. Little did I know that gaming really touches all aspects of the spectrum, as far as backgrounds, ages, all that kind of stuff. And once I started accepting that, I realized that there are people my age, and there are people any age or whatever. And I think that's one of the things that actually probably makes it so much fun, is that there are all these different people that exist within it.
Yeah. No, there can be some concerns that come along with that, but as long as you are making sure to create a safe space, it should be fine. You're all sharing a common interest and having fun. So,
Hells and Bells, this is actually a really good point, that speedrunning is very popular among teens, was talked about a lot when you were 3. Yeah. Just go to, if the last GDQ I went to, I was very aware that the age spectrum was quite a bit. And I thought that was really cool that there are, and that's me personally, that's why I'm personally trying to branch out and talk to, because I'm curious about how these communities, are they functioning the same way my traditional communities are? And I mean, traditional, like old school, like 8-bit and 16-bit games. What's the differences? And you get down to it, people just want to play games that have fun. I mean, It's
Basically,
not that
we just,
complicated.
we just want to play the video game quickly.
Yeah, right. We just want to, exactly. We want to be good at the game. A couple more questions just to finish up here. And one of them is, I've noticed that you still run games in the Monkey Ball series. You mentioned some of the more modern games you're playing. What was the marble game that you mentioned? I totally just drawn
Rolled Out.
Rolled Out. Can you tell me a little bit about Rolled Out and what makes that one fun?
Yes, I was hoping you'd ask this. So Rolled Out went into early access. Oh, I was going to say last month, but it's May now. In March, March 23rd.
Oh, so new.
It is actually developed by Twilight, the person who, if you remember from earlier this session, I said developed Monkey Ball and Monkey Ball 2, the ROM hacks. So Twilight, along with some people who were in the Monkey Ball community, some people outside of the Monkey Ball community, some very talented folks, have brought together a indie marble game that improves on Monkey Ball in many ways. Some people call it a clone. I would disagree because it adds a lot of quality of life features. It adds some new mechanics. I wouldn't quite call it a clone, but I don't know. It's just it is so fun as basically an avid fan of Monkey Ball at this point to have a game that lives up to what the series could have been if it kept improving. Unfortunately, as many of you I'm sure are aware, Monkey Ball kind of fell off a cliff. Very, very sad. But Rolled Out has made the changes that we want to see, that not only speedrunners want to see, but that a lot of casuals have wanted to see. It does a lot of unique, creative things. Like I said, has a lot of quality of life stuff. It's a fun game. Looks great, plays great. Actually, it plays really well. Like coming over from Monkey Ball, which is the gold standard of control and marble rollers, it feels amazing.
I'm glad you mentioned the clone aspect of it, because when I was watching, I think it was one of our recent streams, I was watching the game and I'm like, oh, this looks like what the next step for Monkey Ball would have been. But I could see that clone comparison. But so you mentioned what makes the controls like, an iteration or the next step a little bit better than they were in the Monkey Ball series.
The controls are almost entirely like the same, but there's some stuff that's adjacent to that. Like the collision is more consistent. In Monkey Ball, you could not get collision when you're expecting it, or do get collision when you don't want it because of the inconsistencies in that. But in Rolled Out, that is much less common. So that's helpful. There's this thing called focus mode where you can hold a button and the game will go in slow motion for as long as you have focus meter. You collect coins in the game to build up your focus meter. So that helps with precision. If there's a really difficult strat you're trying to do, maybe a really thin wire you're trying to cross, you can activate focus mode for it. Yeah, so that's really helpful. You can, obviously, I mean, it's a PC game in 2021, so you can remap the buttons basically as needed, do whatever you need, really, which is also very nice. And that's really helpful for accessibility, so I'm really glad that's there.
I'm about to say, play it on any input device you want. I mean, that's pretty cool too, right?
Exactly. We have like top runners on keyboard. And for a game that seems so heavily reliant on precision, I was skeptical at first of how well you can play it on keyboard, and I have been eating my words, and I have never been happier. I'm glad that people can play it so well on keyboard. That's big for accessibility too.
Completely agree.
But yeah, there's also like you can change the rate at which the camera turns. You can do all these things to the camera to get the experience that suits you best. It's really helpful.
I'm glad you mentioned the some of the mechanics to it, because it did look accessible for somebody who maybe didn't play through Monkey Ball. And I mentioned you're obviously, if you're a fan of the Monkey Ball series, you're probably diving into this game. But I was like, it starts off similar. You've got your beginning levels, but the quality of life stuff really seems like it makes a difference and makes it approachable and accessible to people. That's pretty cool.
If I can backtrack here to Monkey Ball, though. A reason why it's such a great speed game and such a popular speed game that I haven't talked about is its practice mode. That is so far ahead of its time. The ability to go into any level and practice it, ridiculous. This is a game that was released in 2001, and you can practice any level over and over, retry almost immediately. So many games in 2021, 20 years later, don't have this feature. It's so nice. And this is something, to bring the discussion back, this is something that Rolled Out does too. And has made sure to do. Probably one of the core aspects of any game like Monkey Ball at this point is making sure you have that practice mode, especially if you want the game to be difficult, which rolled out will be.
I primarily speedrun games on this old console, TurboGrafx 16, and we don't even have save states, so it's like we're in the dark ages as far as that comes. But the games that do actually, the few games that have stage select, it's not, I would say yes, it's a godsend for speedrunners, but then also if you're somebody who wants a little bit maybe to replay through certain parts of the game, that's just like maybe there's some levels you really enjoy or you want to share with some friends. The fact that you have a practice mode or a stage select, game changer. It's a total game changer as far as like replay value for the game.
Exactly. And even if you're trying to do individual level runs,
right.
But the amount of times I've been at like a party and gone into Monkey Ball and picked 3 levels in practice mode and just stunted on them. More than I can count at this point. It happens so often now. It's fun every time.
There are still, Punch Out's a great example where Mike Tyson's Punch Out, people are still trying to, their IL times world records and for individual boxers is still huge, so it's like having that access to do that encourages that kind of running. And then is, our community, the speedrunning community there is no amount of thank yous that can make it really express the how much we appreciate that. So
speaking of thank yous, thank you to Complex Plane because of Complex Plan, he developed a mod that adds console save states to Super Monkey Ball 2. I am not even kidding.
For real?
You can wow. ISO load the ROM on a Wii and have console save states. It's the practice ROM. Not only can you do that, you can start from any individual world in story mode. You can frame advance all on console. Absurd. Yeah.
Forever thankful to people like that in the community, because it's I gotta imagine it's somewhat thankless because you may be the only person who knows how to code in a way that will do that. So, yeah. Oh my gosh.
So it's not always custom levels with the modding community. It's sometimes things like this. Tools. The practice ROM is so absurdly helpful, especially in a game like Monkey Ball 2, where the stages are grander in scale compared to Monkey Ball 1, like I've said. And so there are certain parts of it where I don't really want to play the level for 10 seconds to get to the part I need to practice. It's not as... It's really... I sound spoiled, and I am compared to like racing games where you need to play through the whole track to get to one part. But
yes, right.
It's still very, very nice.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because the people who create some of these tools sometimes don't get the credit that they deserve. And for those of us who, man, the amount of information and the value in a tool like that is you can't express it, and nobody's not getting paid for it. It's not like you're doing this to like sell it or anything like that. It's just for the community. It's pretty amazing. That's awesome.
Very, very thankful for people like Complex Plane.
Absolutely. You still run these games. What's next for you? Or do you have any goals in mind for Monkey Ball 2 rolled out, anything like that?
Monkey Ball 1 and 2, I do want to come back to at some point. I haven't been playing them much recently because I've been playing rolled out.
So good.
I still want to get second place in Monkey Ball 1 Master. So if you've ever seen that leaderboard, it's really funny because at the top there is Callum, who has the only sub 15 ever recorded at 14:56. One of the best Monkey Ball runs you could ever see. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go watch it because it is one of the most pure displays of skill you could find in, dare I say it, any speed game. It's that good. And then in second place is a 15:30. I think it's a 15:31 actually.
Wow.
If I'm not mistaken, it's by Barhunga. But then there's who's in third place then? Oh no.
I just I think third place
is I think third place is a 15:37 by Zella, I believe. And then in fourth place you have me with a 15:44, tied with, I believe, the Lost Llama.
Correct, yes.
Another 15:44. So there's a sub 15, and then there's a 15:30, 15:37, 15:44. So you can see this huge gap there, and that's where I want to slot in eventually. But before I get to that, I'm playing some rolled out. That's going to be continuously updated for the next, I don't know, like a year probably. I'll be playing that for a while, but I want to branch out too. I've dabbled in games like Undertale. I have always wanted to learn a Pokemon speedrun. I've been playing some Hades. That game's fun. I might go back to trying to run that at some point. A lot of my friends are into Celeste. I'd love to play that game. There are a lot of different speed games I want to play, and I keep coming back to Monkey Ball because it is so satisfying to me. Partially because I'm already so good at it.
Right.
But it's, I don't know.
That's a
there's so much stuff I would like to do, and also helping grow the Midwest Speedfest community is probably higher than all of that on my priority list as well.
Absolutely. And that's pretty cool, by the way, that you have this variety of gamings because, well, Undertales and Hades are, I mean, they're two different sides of the spectrum here. So, I mean, but also they're pretty different than what Monkey Ball presents. So I think that's pretty cool that you're interested in games outside of just, marble type of experience. That's pretty cool.
I've done skateboarding games as well. Like I ran Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure for GDQ, as I've said, like way back when we started. Although that is, believe it or not, more similar than you would think because it's a 3D space. Obviously, the movement isn't quite the same, but it's a 3D space with your movement is relatively limited in that you can't turn on a dime. You have to slow down first, sort of. Mm-hmm. Not really as much, but there are even pause strats like pause buffers, menu storage strats in Disney's Extreme Skate Adventure. It's absurd. But yeah, no, I find lots of different things fun to run. I'm just fascinated by the routes and the tech in a lot of these speed games too, and so I want to learn to do it for myself. Yeah.
That's something. Oh, God, I'm sorry.
I also kind of want to go back to Monkey Ball 2 as well, because that community is so popular, and get an even better time in the popular categories or whatnot. Because some of the times there in challenge mode don't reflect how skilled I am as a runner, and then the time that does in story mode, I can still push and get an even better time. I want to do so many different things. I don't have time for all of them. Why are so many games so fun to run? It's a problem.
If I didn't have to work, I tell you, I would, even then, I don't know if I'd have enough time to play all the games. I'm right there with you. And I think you brought up a really good point about that different games as a speedrun present these new and interesting ways of playing games that you may not have gone through. So it's fun to try out things you've never done before, which is really cool.
Absolutely.
So, totally understand. I'm on the same page as you with that one. If people are interested in Midwest Speedfest and they want to see what's coming up next and all this kind of thing, where can people go? Where can people find information about that?
Twitch.tv/MidwestSpeedfest, or better yet, MidwestSpeedfest.com.
Website.
I am going to double check really quick and make sure that is the link. Make sure I have this absolutely correct. MidwestSpeedfest.com. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, exactly. MidwestSpeedfest.com. We got links to our Twitch and Twitter on there. Also, join our Discord. It should be linked through our Twitch. Should be. Yeah,
I'll include a link in the description too. I'll link it in the description you can find, because these are important causes that I hope people, if they're interested, can support it. Even just watching it, just check it out when it's live. Just being there, lurking away like I do quite often is a great way to support as well. So
our Discord is actually the #1 spot to be if you want to be involved with Speedfest. We've got the announcements channel. You can chat with folks, have a question answered pretty quickly because obviously staff are in there. It's the main way we coordinate with everybody and communicate things to everybody, so it's definitely the space you want to be if you're interested.
That is good to know, and a great place to find stuff about it as well. How about you? If people want to find you, your speedrunning, your streaming, where can people go to find you?
Twitch.tv/Helix13_. Same thing on Twitter, Helix13_. As I always say, don't forget the underscore because Helix 13 is someone else.
I found that out as I was doing some research. No, thankfully I'd already been following you for a while. But back in the day when I saw your run, I was like, oh my gosh, let's find some information. Googling. I always feel like I'm stalking, but at the same point, I want to see your speed run. So how do I go about doing it? So
I wonder how many people have done that. They tried to type Helix 13 and just got lost.
That's a good question.
Selfishly, I want to get partner one day so I can just get Helix.
Yeah, right. No, just change it out. I mean, I don't even know if Helix is that person active who has that without the.
I don't believe so.
I don't think so either.
It's even funnier. It's even funnier on Twitter because twitter.com/Helix is an account for a show that hasn't been active since like 2015, and it's a partner. It has a check mark. It's a verified account, so nobody's ever getting it. But it hasn't been active since 2015. Just.
Damn you people. Come on.
Okay.
Helix is still here doing stuff. Come on.
There are so many other Helixes too. My time in the Smash community, I ran into like 3 of them. It's a really common tag. It's a good name, but it's common for a reason. Yeah.
Well, and if you don't want to share, I totally understand. But is there any story behind it or how you ended up picking that name as a screen name?
I was going to a Smash tournament and I needed a name and I threw Helix at the wall and it stuck. That's it. It's a Twitch Plays Pokemon was popular around that time. That's part of the reason. I was like, sure, why not? It worked.
Hey, You know,
Yeah.
and it's Dix. It's a great name. So it's I did know, especially in our community in speedrunning. I mean, there's not a lot of Helixes out there, so that's kind of nice.
I'm lucky that there aren't, because like I said, there are in the Smash community. Even like, I've been to a tournament that had 2 other Helixes at it. I money matched one of them.
Nice. Well, I really do. I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing so much about Monkey Ball, but also your own speedrunning and Midwest Speedfest and all this kind of stuff. I've been a fan, and I will continue to be a fan, and I appreciate all the work you're doing behind the scenes to make these things happen. But also, I've really enjoyed watching. It's the reason I started watching Monkey Ball speedruns is because of your AGDQ 2020 run. So this is very cool. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thanks for being here.
Every runner loves to hear that. I started watching X Speed Game because of you. Guys, love that. Even more, I started running X Game because of you. Like, I'm not the only one. I've seen my other friends in the community get the same treatment. It's always so cool. But thank you for bringing me on, for chatting with me, letting me spill my brain at you. I know I talked quite a bit. I could go for days about all of this stuff. I love talking about it. You asked a lot of the questions that I love to answer too, so I had stuff ready. But no, I appreciate it. Not only the support personally, but also, like I said, bringing me on, helping me spread and whatever I want to talk about to a greater audience. Helping spread the word about Midwest Speedfest, helping us, reach more people, help us support the causes that we're trying to support. Appreciate
Absolutely. No, glad to do it. Thanks everyone for listening, watching, viewing, liking, subscribing, and sharing. All of that stuff goes a long way to helping out the podcast. If you'd like any additional info, you can go to sequencebreakpodcast.com. All of our past episodes, everything's on there. You'll find everything there. If you'd like to watch live, follow the Sequence Break Twitter. That is Sequence Break PC, and you can join in, ask some questions, watch the whole thing live. It does happen. It's not really a set time, but I do post when I go live. Everything else, if you have any questions or anything like that, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.